My name is Valerie Harper, and the day my sister Brooke married Lieutenant Commander Ryan Caldwell at the Oceanview Country Club in Wilmington, North Carolina, she stood in front of 200 guests and announced that I was the family disappointment. She said it with a smile, like it was a joke everyone was in on. Like my life was a punchline she'd been waiting years to deliver. I wish I could tell you that after 31 years of clawing my way up from nothing, those words bounced right off me. But they didn't. They sank in deep, sharp as fishhooks, and they pulled. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood there in a pale yellow bridesmaid dress that didn't fit right, holding a bouquet of white roses that were already wilting in the June heat. The reception hall overlooked the Cape Fear River, all floor-to-ceiling windows and polished hardwood, chandeliers dripping crystal like frozen rain. A jazz quartet played something soft in the corner, and the air smelled of prime rib and expensive perfume. Everyone was dressed in their Sunday best, pearls and pressed suits, champagne flutes catching the afternoon light. And there was Brooke, radiant in her ivory gown, her hair swept up in perfect curls, holding court at the head table like a queen on her throne. She raised her glass for a toast. The room quieted. Forks paused mid-bite. Conversations trailed off. Even the musicians seemed to hold their breath. That's when she said it. Some people spend their whole lives trying to find themselves, Brooke began, her voice carrying that honeyed drawl she'd perfected over the years. And some people just never quite get there. She turned, her eyes landing on me like a spotlight I never asked for. My sister Valerie, bless her heart, has been searching for 20 years. College dropout, dead-end jobs, still renting an apartment at 31. But hey, at least she showed up today, right? The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. A few people clapped awkwardly. Someone at the back table whispered loud enough for me to hear, "My God, did she really just say that?" My father, Gerald, sat stone-faced at the family table, his tie slightly crooked, nursing a bourbon that was mostly ice by then. He didn't defend me. He never did. Uncle Thomas, my mother's younger brother, shifted in his seat and started to stand, but I caught his eye and shook my head. Not here. Not now. Brooke wasn't finished. She turned to Ryan, her new husband, who sat beside her in his dress whites, the gold buttons gleaming, his face unreadable behind a carefully neutral expression. Navy SEALs are trained not to show emotion, and right then, he looked like granite. Thank God I found Ryan, Brooke continued, squeezing his shoulder possessively. A real man with a real career. Someone who knows what commitment looks like. She paused for effect, letting the contrast hang in the air between us. Not everyone can say that. The applause that followed was louder this time, fueled by champagne and the desire to move past the awkwardness. The jazz quartet started up again, playing something upbeat to shift the mood. Guests turned back to their plates, their conversations resuming in hushed tones. But I felt every eye that lingered on me, every pitying glance, every whispered assessment. I set my bouquet down on the nearest table, the roses scattering a few loose petals, and told the server passing by, "Water, please. Just water." Then I walked out through the French doors onto the terrace. The late afternoon sun hung low over the river, painting the water in shades of copper and gold. The air was thick, humid, the kind that clings to your skin and makes your clothes stick. I could hear the distant hum of boat engines, the cry of gulls circling overhead. A couple of groomsmen stood by the railing, smoking cigars and laughing about something I couldn't hear. They glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I leaned against the stone balustrade, gripping the edge until my knuckles went white. My reflection stared back at me from the glass doors, a woman in a too-tight yellow dress that made me look washed out, hair pinned up in a style that wasn't mine, makeup applied by a bridesmaid who kept saying, "Don't worry, we'll make you look presentable." Inside, I could see Brooke moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations, laughing that perfect laugh she'd practiced in the mirror since we were kids. Ryan stood beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. He looked every inch the hero, the kind of man people write songs about. And Brooke looked like she'd won the lottery. I thought about leaving. Just walking down those stone steps, through the parking lot, and getting into my beat-up Honda Civic with the check engine light that never turned off. I thought about the overnight bag I'd packed, still sitting in my room at the hotel 3 miles down the road. I thought about the life I'd built in San Diego, small and quiet and mine, a life Brooke had just reduced to a failure in front of everyone who mattered. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the humiliation and the anger and the exhaustion, there was a part of me that remembered who I was before Brooke's words tried to erase it. A part of me that had survived worse than this. The drive from San Diego to Wilmington had taken 3 days. I'd left on a Tuesday morning, the marine layer still clinging to the coast, and drove east through desert and plains and pine forests until the landscape turned green and humid. I didn't fly because I couldn't afford the last-minute ticket, and I didn't ask Brooke for help because I knew what she'd say. She'd already made it clear that my presence was optional, a courtesy invitation sent 2 months late with a note that read, "If you can make it, great. If not, we understand." I made it. I always made it. That's what people don't understand about being the disappointment in the family. You show up anyway. You smile through the barbs and the backhanded compliments and the casual cruelty disguised as concern. You show up because somewhere in the back of your mind, you're still that kid trying to prove you're worth keeping around. Brooke and I weren't always enemies. Once, a long time ago, we were something close to friends. We shared a bedroom in a cramped apartment in Eugene, Oregon, twin beds separated by a nightstand with a lamp that flickered when you touched it. We were 4 years apart, me the older one, her the baby. Mom used to say I was the serious one, always reading, always planning. Brooke was the charmer, the one who could walk into a room and make everyone smile. Mom was a nurse at Sacred Heart Medical Center, working nights mostly, coming home smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion. Dad worked construction when the work was steady, which it wasn't. He had a temper that flared hot and fast, usually fueled by whatever he'd been drinking. Mom was the buffer, the one who kept the peace, who smoothed things over, who told us girls to stay quiet when Dad came home in a mood. I learned early to make myself small. To keep my grades up, to stay out of trouble, to not ask for things we couldn't afford. Brooke learned the opposite. She learned that if she smiled big enough, if she asked sweetly enough, people gave her what she wanted. And it worked. Teachers loved her. Neighbors adored her. Dad's anger never seemed to land on her the way it did on me. When I was 17, I got a full ride to Oregon State. Academic scholarship, the first person in our family to go to college. Mom cried when the letter came. She held it in her hands like it was made of glass, her fingers trembling, and she said, "Valerie, you're going to do something with your life. You're going to be someone." Dad didn't say much. He just grunted and went back to his beer. I lasted 2 years. 2 years of juggling classes and a part-time job at a campus bookstore, 2 years of rationing ramen and walking everywhere because I couldn't afford gas. Then Mom got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosis to death in 6 months. I came home to help. Brooke was still in high school, 16 and terrified, and Dad had already checked out emotionally. I was the one who took Mom to her appointments, who held her hair back when the chemo made her sick, who sat beside her hospital bed and read to her when she couldn't sleep. I was the one who signed the DNR when the time came, who held her hand as she slipped away, who planned the funeral because Dad couldn't and Brooke wouldn't. After Mom died, I tried to go back to school. But the money was gone, used up on medical bills and funeral costs. The scholarship had conditions, enrollment requirements I'd missed while I was home. I reapplied, appealed, begged. They said no. So I stayed in Eugene, got a job waiting tables at a diner called the Griddle House, and told myself it was temporary. Temporary turned into a year. Then 2. Then 5. Brooke, meanwhile, sailed through high school on charm and decent grades. She got into UNC Chapel Hill, not on scholarship but on loans and a work-study program she barely participated in. She joined a sorority, dated a string of fraternity boys, graduated with a degree in communications and a plan to work in marketing. She moved to Wilmington, got an entry-level job at a branding agency, and climbed the ladder with the same ease she'd climbed everything else. We drifted. Phone calls became texts. Texts became holiday cards. She never asked how I was doing. I stopped offering. When Dad remarried a woman named Linda 3 years after Mom's death, Brooke flew home for the wedding. I couldn't afford the ticket. Brooke sent me a picture from the reception, her and Dad and Linda all smiling, and wrote, "Wish you were here," with a heart emoji. I didn't respond. The last time we spoke before the wedding invitation arrived, Brooke called me out of the blue. It was late, past 11, and I was just getting home from a double shift at the restaurant where I worked in San Diego. I'd moved there 2 years earlier, chasing a job opportunity that turned out to be another dead end, but I stayed because the weather was nice and I was tired of running. "Val," Brooke said, her voice bright and bubbly. "Guess what?" "What?" "I'm engaged. His name is Ryan. He's a Navy SEAL. Can you believe it?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "We're getting married in June." "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat. "You'll come, right?" "I mean, you're my sister. I need you there." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her I couldn't afford it, couldn't take the time off work, couldn't stomach the idea of watching her live the life I was supposed to have. But I didn't. Because that's what you do when you're the older sister, the responsible one, the one who's supposed to rise above. "I'll be there," I said. "Great. I'll send you the details." "Oh, and Val? Try to look nice, okay? I know money's tight, but it's important to me that everyone looks put together." She hung up before I could respond. Standing on that terrace in Wilmington, watching the sun dip lower over the river, I replayed that conversation in my head. Try to look nice. Like I was some embarrassing relative she had to apologize for. Like my presence was a favor she was doing me. The thing about humiliation is that it doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in slowly, finding all the cracks you thought you'd sealed up. It reminds you of every time you weren't good enough, every time you failed, every time you were left behind. And it whispers that maybe, just maybe, they were right about you all along. Inside, the reception was in full swing. I could hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Through the windows, I saw Brooke dancing with Ryan, her head resting on his shoulder, her eyes closed like she was living in a dream. He held her carefully, his movements measured, his expression still unreadable. I thought about Chief Dawson, the man who'd given me my first real break. I'd met him 5 years ago when I was working as a dispatcher for a private security company in San Diego. He was retired Navy, a 20-year veteran who'd seen more combat than most people could imagine. He came into the office one day looking for someone to help him organize a charity event for wounded veterans, and I volunteered. We became friends. He saw something in me, something I'd stopped seeing in myself. He told me once, "Valerie, you've got grit. Don't confuse a hard road with a wrong road." He helped me get my private investigator's license, helped me start my own small firm doing background checks and skip tracing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd built it from nothing, just like everything else in my life. But Brooke didn't know that. She didn't know about the cases I'd solved, the clients I'd helped, the quiet satisfaction I felt when I closed a file and knew I'd done good work. She didn't know because she'd never asked. And I'd never told her because I was tired of trying to prove my worth to someone who'd already decided I had none. The groomsmen by the railing finished their cigars and headed back inside, leaving me alone. The river darkened as the sun sank lower, the water turning from copper to charcoal. I stayed there, letting the evening wrap around me, trying to decide what to do next. That's when I heard the door open behind me. I turned, expecting Uncle Thomas or maybe a well-meaning guest offering hollow sympathy. Instead, it was Ryan. He stood in the doorway, still in his dress whites, his hands clasped behind his back. His face was no longer neutral. It was something else, something I couldn't quite read. "Valerie," he said, his voice low and steady. "Can we talk?" I didn't know Ryan Caldwell. Not really. We'd met exactly twice before the wedding. The first time was at the engagement party 8 months ago, a backyard barbecue at Dad's house where Brooke had paraded him around like a trophy. He'd shaken my hand with a firm grip, looked me in the eye, and said it was good to meet me. The second time was yesterday at the rehearsal dinner, where he'd sat at the opposite end of the table and barely spoke except to answer direct questions. Navy SEALs have a reputation. They're the quiet professionals, the ones who operate in shadows and don't talk about their work. Ryan fit that mold perfectly. He was probably 6'2", built like someone who could run for days and still have energy left to fight. His face was weathered in a way that suggested he'd spent years in harsh climates, and his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare you see in men who've seen things they can't unsee. Now he stood in the doorway, those same eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I didn't. I'd spent too many years being looked through, being dismissed. If he had something to say, he could say it to my face. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He stepped out onto the terrace, closing the door behind him. The music from inside became muffled, distant. He walked to the railing, leaving a few feet of space between us, and stared out at the river. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Just stood there, hands still clasped behind his back, jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure how to spit out. "Your sister," he finally said, his voice low enough that I had to lean in slightly to hear, "talks about you a lot." I laughed, bitter and short. "I'm sure she does. Not the way you think." He turned to face me then, and there was something in his expression that caught me off guard. Not pity. Not sympathy. Something closer to respect, maybe, or recognition. "She's scared of you." That stopped me cold. "What?" "Brooke. She's terrified of you. Has been for years, according to her." I shook my head, confusion mixing with anger. "That doesn't make any sense. Did you hear what she just said in there? She called me a failure in front of 200 people." I heard. His jaw tightened. "That's why I'm out here." The way he said it made something shift in my chest. Not hope, exactly. More like curiosity. I crossed my arms, the fabric of the bridesmaid dress pulling tight across my shoulders. Why would she be scared of me? I'm the one who dropped out of college. I'm the one working dead-end jobs. I'm the one still renting at 31. Her words, not mine. Ryan was quiet for another moment, his gaze moving past me toward the darkening river. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight I hadn't expected. "Do you know what we do in the teams?" "SEALs, I mean." "Kill terrorists," I said flatly. "Save hostages. Blow things up. Sometimes." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face, then vanished. "But mostly, we assess. We watch. We gather intelligence. We figure out who the real threats are and who's just making noise." He looked back at me. "Brooke makes a lot of noise." I didn't know what to say to that. My mind was still stuck on the idea that Brooke, golden child Brooke, perfect Brooke, was somehow afraid of me. It didn't compute. "She told me about your mom," Ryan continued. "About how you came home from college to take care of her. How you put your life on hold for a year." 6 months, I corrected automatically. "She died 6 months after the diagnosis. And you never went back to school. Couldn't afford it. Scholarships have conditions. I missed too many credits." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away. "She also told me you worked 3 jobs at one point. Waitressing, cleaning houses, doing overnight shifts at a warehouse." 2 jobs, I said. "She's exaggerating. She said you sent money home every month to help with bills even after your dad remarried." I felt my face flush. That was true, and I'd never told anyone about it. Not even Uncle Thomas. How would she even know that? Your dad mentioned it once. Apparently, Brooke overheard. Ryan's expression hardened slightly. She didn't like it. Made her look bad, I think. The successful daughter who never sent a dime versus the dropout who kept the lights on. The weight of his words settled over me like a blanket I didn't want. I'd never thought about it that way. I'd just done what needed doing. Mom had raised me to take care of family, and even after she was gone, even after Dad had let me down more times than I could count, I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed something. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice quieter now. Ryan turned fully toward me, his posture shifting slightly. It wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't casual either. It was the stance of someone preparing to say something important. Because I need you to understand something before I go back in there. Your sister is not a good person. The bluntness of it hit me like cold water. I blinked, opened my mouth, closed it again. I didn't see it at first, he continued. She's good at playing a part. Sweet, charming, supportive. But over the last year, I've watched her tear down everyone around her. Her co-workers, her friends, her father. You're just the most recent target. He paused, his eyes searching mine. And the one she resents the most. Why? The question came out smaller than I intended, almost childlike. Because you survived without her. Because you didn't need her approval to keep going. Because every time she brags about her job, her house, her life, there's a voice in the back of her head reminding her that you did more with less and never complained about it. Ryan's voice dropped even lower. That terrifies her. So she tries to cut you down to size every chance she gets. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't know Brooke the way I did, that siblings were complicated and he was reading too much into it. But the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere deep down, in a place I'd been ignoring for years, I knew he was right. What do you want me to say? I asked finally. Nothing. I just wanted you to know that I see it. And I'm not okay with it. He straightened, rolling his shoulders back. I made a vow today. For better or worse. I'll honor that. But I won't stand by and watch her destroy people just because she can. Before I could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Kristen, Brooke's maid of honor and college roommate. She was blonde, bubbly, and already tipsy, her face flushed from champagne. There you are, she sang, pointing at Ryan. Your wife is looking for you. First dance is coming up. Ryan nodded, his expression smoothing back into that neutral mask. He glanced at me one more time, something unspoken passing between us, then walked back inside without another word. Kristen lingered, her eyes flicking between me and the door Ryan had just disappeared through. Everything okay out here? Fine, I said. She didn't look convinced, but she was too drunk to press. Well, come back in soon. You're missing all the fun. She giggled and stumbled back inside, the door swinging shut behind her. I stayed on the terrace a while longer, Ryan's words echoing in my head. Your sister is not a good person. It should have felt validating, having someone else finally see what I'd been dealing with for years. But instead, it just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that the girl I'd shared a bedroom with, the one I'd protected from Dad's moods and walked to school every morning, had grown into someone capable of such casual cruelty. The sun was almost gone now, just a thin line of orange on the horizon. The river had turned black, reflecting the first stars beginning to prick through the twilight. I thought about my apartment in San Diego, small and cluttered with case files and coffee mugs I never washed. I thought about Chief Dawson, who was probably at the VA hospital right now, playing cards with other vets and telling stories about the old days. I thought about the life I'd built, brick by brick, with no help and no shortcuts. And I thought about the fact that Brooke had no idea who I really was. She still saw me as the girl who'd failed, the one who couldn't hack it, the one who'd never amount to anything. She had no clue about the people I'd helped, the cases I'd solved, the small corner of the world I'd made better just by showing up and doing the work. Maybe it was time she found out. I took a deep breath, smoothed down the front of my dress, and walked back inside. The reception was in full swing. The jazz quartet had been replaced by a DJ spinning something upbeat and modern. Couples filled the dance floor, moving in that awkward way people do at weddings when they've had just enough alcohol to lose their inhibitions but not enough to lose their coordination. The lighting had shifted, softer now, colored LEDs washing the room in blues and purples. Brooke and Ryan were in the center of it all, swaying to a slow song I didn't recognize. She had her arms around his neck, her head tilted back, laughing at something he'd said. He held her waist loosely, his face unreadable again. I wondered what he was thinking, whether he regretted the conversation we'd just had, whether he wished he'd kept his observations to himself. I found Uncle Thomas at the bar, nursing a whiskey neat. He was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that always looked like it was about to smile. He'd been my lifeline growing up, the one person besides Mom who'd treated me like I mattered. "There she is," he said as I approached, his voice warm. "Thought you'd made a run for it." "Thought about it," I admitted, sliding onto the stool next to him. He signaled the bartender, a young guy with a man bun and an earring. "What's she drinking?" "Vodka tonic," I said. "Heavy on the vodka." The bartender nodded and started mixing. Uncle Thomas studied me with those sharp eyes of his, the ones that missed nothing. "You okay, kiddo?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." He clinked his glass against mine when the drink arrived. "That's my girl. Your mom would be proud of you, you know. The way you've handled yourself." "Mom would have told me to leave," I said, taking a long sip. The vodka burned, but in a good way. "Maybe. But she also would have told you to hold your head high. And you've done that." He paused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Brooke's always been insecure. Even when you two were little. She needed constant reassurance, constant attention. Your mom saw it. Tried to balance it out, make sure you both felt loved. Mom succeeded with me. Not so much with Brooke. That's not your fault." Uncle Thomas's voice was firm. "You can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. Believe me, I've tried with your dad for decades." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the party unfold around us. Dad was at a table near the front, deep in conversation with Linda's sister. He hadn't looked at me once since the toast. Par for the course. The DJ announced the father-daughter dance, and Brooke floated onto the floor with Dad. They moved stiffly, neither of them particularly graceful, but the photographer circled them like a shark, snapping pictures from every angle. The song was something syrupy and sentimental, about little girls growing up and daddies letting go. I felt my stomach turn. "You ever think about what your life would look like if Mom hadn't gotten sick?" Uncle Thomas asked quietly. "Every day," I admitted. But then I remember that, what if, is just another word for never. I can't live there. He smiled, sad and proud at the same time. "Wise beyond your years, kid." The song ended, and the DJ called for a special dance. All the single ladies to the floor. "It's time for the bouquet toss." A collective groan went up from the unmarried women in attendance, but Kristen and the other bridesmaids started herding them toward the center of the room. I tried to slide off the stool and disappear into the crowd, but Kristen spotted me. "Val. Get out here." I shook my head. "I'm good. Come on. Don't be a party pooper." She was already pulling me by the arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so drunk. I let myself be dragged onto the floor, more out of exhaustion than compliance. About 15 women clustered together, ranging from teenagers to women in their 60s who'd been single so long they'd stopped caring. Brooke stood at the front, her back to us, holding the bouquet high. The DJ counted down. 3, 2, 1. Brooke threw the bouquet over her shoulder. It arced through the air in slow motion, white roses tumbling end over end. Women shrieked and lunged. I stood still, not even pretending to try. The bouquet hit me square in the chest. I caught it on instinct, my hands closing around the stems before my brain could register what had happened. The room erupted in applause and laughter. Kristen screamed, "Oh my God, Val. You're next." I looked down at the flowers in my hands, the same ones I'd been holding earlier when Brooke had humiliated me. Then I looked up and saw her face. She'd turned around, expecting to see some eager bridesmaid or desperate single woman clutching her bouquet. Instead, she saw me. And the look on her face was pure fury. She recovered quickly, slipping back into her pageant smile. "Well, look at that. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Val." The crowd laughed, but there was an edge to it now. People were starting to sense the tension, the undercurrent of hostility that ran between us. Ryan, standing near the edge of the dance floor, was watching carefully. So was Uncle Thomas. I walked up to Brooke, the bouquet still in my hands, and looked her dead in the eye. "You know what, Brooke? I think I'll keep this. Consider it a reminder." "A reminder of what?" she asked, her smile tight. "That some things are worth catching. And some things aren't." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her mouth half open. Behind me, I heard someone whistle low. Someone else muttered, "Damn." Uncle Thomas raised his glass in a silent toast. I made it back to the bar and set the bouquet down, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. The bartender refilled my drink without being asked. I downed half of it in one go. That's when Ryan appeared at my elbow. He didn't say anything, just stood there, his presence solid and grounding. After a moment, he spoke, his voice barely audible over the music. "She's going to come at you harder now. You know that, right?" "Let her," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. He nodded, a flicker of something crossing his face. Approval, maybe. Or respect. Good. Because what she doesn't know is that I've been doing some digging. I turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "I'm a SEAL, Valerie. We don't just assess current threats. We investigate backgrounds. We vet people." His eyes were steady on mine. "I vetted you." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because Brooke painted a very specific picture of you. And something about it didn't add up." He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then showed me the screen. It was a news article, 6 months old, from the San Diego Tribune. The headline read, "Local investigator helps reunite family after 15-year search." My face stared back at me from the photo. I remembered that case. A woman whose sister had vanished in the 90s, presumed dead. I'd found her alive, living under a new name in Arizona. It had taken 8 months of work, countless dead ends, and a breakthrough that had come at 3 in the morning after too much coffee and not enough sleep. "That's you," Ryan said. "And that's just one article. I found 6 more. Cases you've solved. People you've helped." He pocketed his phone. "You're not a failure, Valerie. You're a damn good investigator. And your sister has no idea." I didn't know what to say. My throat was tight, my eyes stinging. I'd worked so hard to build something, and I'd convinced myself it didn't matter because Brooke had decided it didn't matter. But here was this man, this stranger, telling me he'd seen it. He'd looked. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice rough. "Because I married the wrong woman," he said simply. "And I need to know there are still good people in this family. For when things inevitably fall apart." Before I could respond, the DJ's voice boomed across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bride has requested a very special moment. Brooke, come on up." Brooke took the microphone, her face glowing in the spotlight. She was about to say something. And based on the look in her eyes, it wasn't going to be kind. Brooke tapped the microphone twice, the sound echoing through the reception hall like a judge's gavel. The room settled into expectant silence. She stood there in her ivory gown, backlit by purple LEDs, looking every bit the fairy tale princess she'd always believed herself to be. Her smile was wide, practiced, the same one I'd seen her use in every photograph since she was 16. "I just want to take a moment," she began, her voice dripping with that sugary sweetness she reserved for public performances, "to thank everyone for being here on the most important day of my life. Your love and support means everything to Ryan and me." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. People smiled, raised their glasses, settled back in their chairs. They thought this was going to be a standard wedding speech, heartfelt gratitude wrapped in champagne sentiment. I knew better. I could see it in the way her eyes scanned the room, landing on me for just a fraction of a second before moving on. She was hunting. "Family is so important," Brooke continued, her hand resting on her heart in a gesture of false sincerity. "And I'm blessed to have such an incredible support system. My father, who worked so hard to give us everything we needed growing up." She gestured toward Dad, who raised his bourbon glass with a crooked smile. "My amazing bridesmaids, who have been with me through thick and thin." Kristen and the other women squealed and clapped. Then her gaze locked onto me. The smile stayed fixed, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. "And of course, my sister Valerie. My big sister." She paused for effect, letting those words hang. Val has had such an interesting journey. While some of us were building careers and finding our paths, Val was out there figuring things out the hard way. And you know what? I admire that. I really do. Her tone was honey over razor blades. It takes real courage to keep trying after so many setbacks. To keep pushing forward even when life keeps pushing back. Uncle Thomas shifted in his seat beside me. His hand moved toward mine, but I pulled away. I didn't need comfort. Not yet. "Val's taught me so much over the years," Brooke went on, warming to her subject now. "She's taught me that education isn't everything. That you don't need a degree to find your place in the world. That sometimes, settling for less is actually settling for what's meant for you." She laughed lightly, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "And I think that's beautiful, in its own way." The room had gone quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. Uncomfortable. A few people exchanged glances. Someone coughed. I saw one of the older guests, a woman in a pearl necklace who'd been introduced as Ryan's grandmother, frown deeply and whisper something to the man beside her. I stood there, gripping the edge of the bar, my knuckles white against the polished wood. Every instinct screamed at me to walk out, to remove myself from this public dissection of my life. But something kept me rooted. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the look on Ryan's face as he stood near the dance floor, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "So here's to Valerie," Brooke raised her champagne flute high, "for reminding us all that not everyone is meant for greatness, and that's okay. We need people who are content with ordinary lives, who don't reach too high or dream too big. The world needs dishwashers just as much as it needs doctors, right?" She giggled, that same manufactured sound. "I mean waitresses. The world needs waitresses." A few people laughed nervously. Most didn't. The photographer had stopped taking pictures. Even the DJ looked uncomfortable, his finger hovering over the controls like he was ready to cue up music the second this train wreck ended. Brooke wasn't finished. "I just want Val to know that I'm here for her. Always. Even when things don't work out. Even when dreams fall apart. Even when life doesn't turn out the way we planned. That's what sisters do. We lift each other up, especially when one of us needs a little extra help staying afloat." She looked directly at me, her eyes glittering with triumph. "I love you, Val. To my sister." She drank. A handful of people, mostly those too drunk or too oblivious to understand what had just happened, echoed the toast. But most of the room sat in stunned silence, glasses halfway to lips, unsure whether to participate in what had clearly crossed the line from teasing into cruelty. I felt my face burning. Not from shame, but from rage. Pure, white-hot rage that started in my chest and spread through every limb. My hands trembled. My breath came shallow and fast. For the first time in my life, I understood what people meant when they said they saw red. Uncle Thomas stood up. That's enough. But someone else moved faster. Ryan crossed the dance floor in 4 long strides. He took the microphone from Brooke's hand, his movements precise and controlled, the kind of economy of motion that comes from years of training. She blinked in surprise, her smile faltering. "Thank you, honey," he said, his voice carrying across the room with calm authority. That was something. He turned to address the crowd, but his posture had changed. The easy Groom persona had evaporated. What stood there now was a Navy SEAL, a man accustomed to command. "I have something to add." Brooke's face went pale. She reached for the microphone. "Ryan, we should probably," he moved it out of her reach, his eyes never leaving the crowd. "When I met Brooke's family, I did what I always do. I observed. I asked questions. I listened." His gaze swept the room, landing on various faces. "And I learned some very interesting things about Valerie Harper." My stomach dropped. What was he doing? "I learned that when she was 19 years old, she left college to care for her dying mother. Full-time care. Round the clock. She was the one who sat in hospital rooms. The one who handled medications. The one who held her mother's hand at the end." His voice was steady, factual, like he was delivering a mission briefing. Her father wasn't there. Her sister was 16 and understandably overwhelmed. So Valerie did it alone. People were leaning forward now, listening. The discomfort in the room had shifted into something else. Attention. Real attention. After her mother died, Valerie tried to return to school. But the medical bills had wiped out what little savings the family had. Her scholarship, which required continuous enrollment, was gone. So she stayed home and worked. She sent money to her father every month to keep the household running. She did this for 3 years. Ryan's eyes found mine across the room. 3 years of supporting a family that never thanked her. Brooke tugged at his sleeve. "Ryan, this isn't appropriate, I'm not done." His tone was sharp enough that she stepped back. Eventually, Valerie moved to San Diego. She worked security dispatch. Long hours, low pay, the kind of job most people use as a stepping stone and then forget. But Valerie didn't forget. She met a retired Navy chief named Dawson who saw something in her. He helped her get her private investigator's license. He pulled out his phone again, holding it up so the screen was visible to those nearby. "This is a news article from 6 months ago. Valerie solved a cold missing person case that had been dead for 15 years. She found a woman everyone had given up on. Reunited her with her family." He swiped to another article. "This one is from 2 years ago. She tracked down a man who'd embezzled $200,000 from a small business owner, almost bankrupting him. Police had closed the case. Valerie didn't." The room was dead silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. "There are 6 more articles like this," Ryan continued. 6 cases where Valerie Harper did what trained professionals couldn't or wouldn't do. She helps people. She solves problems. She shows up when it matters." He lowered the phone, his jaw set. "So when my wife stands up here and talks about settling for less, about ordinary lives and low ambitions, I want everyone in this room to know exactly who she's talking about. She's talking about a woman who has done more with less than most people do with everything." Brooke's face had gone from pale to crimson. "You're embarrassing me." "Good," Ryan said flatly. He turned to her, and for the first time since I'd met him, genuine emotion cracked through his controlled exterior. It was anger, cold and precise. "Because what you just did to your sister? That was beyond embarrassing. That was cruel. And I won't be married to someone who treats family like that." The room collectively held its breath. Someone near the back dropped a fork, the clatter impossibly loud. "You don't mean that," Brooke whispered, but her voice carried through the microphone still in Ryan's hand. "I absolutely mean it." He set the microphone down on the nearest table, the thump reverberating. Then he turned to face her fully, his back to the crowd. His voice dropped low enough that only those nearby could hear, but the acoustics of the room carried his words anyway. I've spent the last year watching you. I thought I was in love with you. Maybe I was, at first. But the woman I fell for doesn't exist. You're a performance. And underneath that performance is someone I don't recognize and don't respect. Tears welled in Brooke's eyes, but they looked more like tears of fury than sadness. You can't do this. Not here. Not today. You started this, Ryan said simply. I'm just finishing it. He walked away from her, past the head table, past the gaping guests, straight toward me. The crowd parted like water. When he reached the bar, he stopped, his eyes meeting mine. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have stopped her the first time. I should have said something at the rehearsal dinner, at the engagement party, every time she took a shot at you. I didn't because I thought it would get better. It won't. She won't. I didn't know what to say. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. This man, this stranger, had just blown up his own wedding to defend me. Had just called out his bride in front of everyone. Had just walked away from the whole thing. Why? I managed to choke out. Because someone had to, he said. And because what she said about you was a lie. You deserve to have someone tell the truth. Behind him, chaos was erupting. Brooke was sobbing now, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Dad had stood up, looking confused and angry. Guests were whispering frantically, some pulling out phones. The photographer was taking pictures again, capturing every moment of the disaster. Uncle Thomas appeared at my other side. We should get you out of here. I nodded numbly. Ryan stepped back, giving me space. As Uncle Thomas guided me toward the exit, I glanced back one more time. Brooke was screaming now, her voice shrill and breaking. She was pointing at me, at Ryan, at everyone and no one. Her perfect day, her perfect wedding, her perfect life was crumbling in real time. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just exhaustion. We made it outside into the warm June night. The parking lot was half full, cars glinting under yellow streetlights. Uncle Thomas led me to his truck, an old Ford Ranger with rust spots and a bumper sticker that read, Semper Fi. Get in, he said gently. I climbed into the passenger seat. He got behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. We just sat there in silence, listening to the muffled sounds of shouting from inside the country club. After a long moment, Uncle Thomas spoke. Your mom used to say that the truth always finds a way out. Even when people try to bury it. He looked over at me. I think she'd be proud of how you handled yourself in there. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice hollow. Exactly. You didn't sink to her level. You didn't fight back. You just stood there and let the truth speak for itself. He paused. And you let that young man speak it for you. That took guts too. To let someone else see you clearly and say it out loud. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cool against my flushed skin. What happens now? Now? You go home. You go back to your life. You keep being who you are. Uncle Thomas started the engine, and it rumbled to life. And Brooke? She'll have to figure out how to live with what she did. That's not your problem anymore. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I saw Ryan emerge from the country club. He'd taken off his jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He stood in the circle of light by the entrance, alone, his head tilted back like he was staring at the stars. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. I wondered who he was calling. I wondered if he regretted what he'd done. I wondered if he'd wake up tomorrow and wish he'd kept quiet, had played along, had let the night end the way it was supposed to. But somehow, I didn't think so. Navy SEALs didn't strike me as the type to second-guess themselves once a decision was made. Uncle Thomas drove me to my hotel, a Holiday Inn Express 3 miles down the highway. He walked me to my room, waited while I unlocked the door, and pulled me into a tight hug. "You call me if you need anything," he said. "Anything at all. I mean it. I will. Thank you." After he left, I stood in the middle of the generic hotel room with its beige walls and floral bedspread. My overnight bag sat unopened on the luggage rack. The yellow bridesmaid dress suddenly felt like it was strangling me. I unzipped it, let it fall to the floor, and stepped out of it like I was shedding skin. I took a long shower, hot enough that the mirror fogged completely. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, I found my phone buzzing on the nightstand. 7 missed calls from Brooke. 12 text messages. I didn't read them. I turned the phone off completely and tossed it onto the bed. Then I lay down in the darkness and stared at the ceiling, replaying the entire evening in my head. The humiliation. The bouquet. The speech. Ryan's intervention. The look on Brooke's face when everything fell apart. And somewhere in all of that, I realized something. I wasn't the family disappointment. I never had been. I'd just been surrounded by people who needed me to be. Because if I was the failure, they didn't have to examine their own choices. If I was the one who'd screwed up, they could feel better about themselves. If I was ordinary, they could feel extraordinary. But I wasn't ordinary. I was exactly who I'd always been. Someone who showed up. Someone who did the work. Someone who helped people when they needed it most. Ryan had seen that. Uncle Thomas had always known it. Mom would have recognized it. The only person who'd forgotten was me. I fell asleep sometime after midnight, the hum of the air conditioner drowning out the sound of traffic on the highway. For the first time in years, I didn't dream about all the things I'd lost. I didn't dream about the college degree I never finished or the life I thought I was supposed to have. I dreamed about going home. Back to San Diego. Back to my small apartment with its cluttered case files and mismatched furniture. Back to the work I was good at. Back to the life I'd built on my own terms. And when I woke up the next morning, that's exactly what I did. The drive back to San Diego took 4 days instead of 3. I wasn't in a hurry. Somewhere outside of Amarillo, I pulled off at a truck stop and bought a cheap prepaid phone. I left my regular phone powered off in the glove compartment, still buzzing intermittently with messages I had no intention of reading. The new phone had one contact saved in it, Uncle Thomas. That was all I needed. The landscape changed as I drove west. The green humidity of North Carolina gave way to red clay and pine forests, then flat Texas plains that stretched forever under a sky so big it made you feel small in the best way possible. I stopped at diners with names like Rosie's and the Bluebird, places with sticky menus and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since dawn. I ate chicken fried steak and pecan pie. I tipped well. I didn't talk to anyone. By the time I crossed into New Mexico, the wedding felt like something that had happened to someone else. The memory was there, vivid and sharp, but it didn't cut anymore. It was just a thing that had occurred, a night that had ended badly for everyone involved, a family gathering that would be talked about in whispers for years. I thought about Ryan a lot during those long stretches of highway. I wondered if he'd stayed at the country club or if he'd left right after I did. I wondered if he'd tried to salvage things with Brooke, if they'd talked it through in some hotel room with the curtains drawn, voices low and urgent. Somehow I doubted it. There had been a finality to the way he'd walked away, like a door closing that wouldn't open again. Part of me felt guilty. His marriage had imploded, at least partially, because of me. But a larger part, the part that had spent too many years absorbing blame that wasn't mine, recognized the truth. Ryan's marriage had imploded because of Brooke. Because of choices she'd made, words she'd spoken, cruelties she'd inflicted. I'd just been the catalyst, the moment when everything came to light. On the third night, somewhere in Arizona, I pulled into a motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The sign out front flickered, vacancy, in neon pink. I paid cash for the room, $38 including tax, and the clerk didn't ask any questions. The room smelled like cigarettes and pine cleaner. The bed sagged in the middle. The television only got 3 channels, and 2 of them were static. I lay there in the dark, listening to trucks rumble past on the interstate, and I let myself think about what came next. I had cases waiting back in San Diego. A skip trace for a bail bondsman, a background check for a woman who suspected her fiancé of lying about his past, a surveillance job for an attorney who needed proof of insurance fraud. Normal work. Steady work. The kind of thing that wouldn't make headlines but would pay my rent and put gas in my car. I thought about calling Chief Dawson, but it was late, and he was probably asleep. He'd gotten frilier in the last year, his hands shaking more, his breathing labored. He didn't talk about it, but I could see the cancer eating away at him. He'd beaten it once, years ago, but it had come back meaner. Still, he showed up at the office every Tuesday to help with filing and to tell stories about the old days. He said it gave him purpose. I think it gave him a reason to get out of bed. The new phone buzzed on the nightstand. Uncle Thomas. You alive? He asked when I answered. More or less. Where are you? Home. Got back yesterday. Your father's been calling. I closed my eyes. What does he want? To talk, apparently. Says he needs to explain some things. Uncle Thomas's voice carried a note of skepticism. I told him you were driving and would reach out when you were ready. That bought you some time. I don't know if I want to talk to him. Then don't. You don't owe him anything, Val. You never did. He paused, and I heard the clink of ice in a glass. For what it's worth, he looked like hell at the wedding. After everything went down, he just sat there staring at his drink. Didn't say a word. Good, I said, and meant it. Brooke's been on social media. Posting about betrayal and family loyalty. Playing the victim pretty hard. Let her. People who matter know the truth. Everyone else can think what they want. Uncle Thomas chuckled. That's the spirit. You sound better than you did the other night. I feel better. Clearer, maybe. Good. You call me when you get home safe, you hear? I will. Thanks, Uncle Thomas. Love you, kiddo. I hung up and set the phone down. Through the thin walls, I could hear a television playing some late-night talk show, canned laughter rising and falling. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The motel's air conditioner rattled and wheezed, doing its best against the desert heat. Sleep came easier that night than it had in months. I rolled into San Diego on a Friday afternoon, the marine layer just starting to burn off as I took the exit toward my neighborhood. The apartment complex was nothing special, a 2-story stucco building painted pale yellow with numbered parking spots and a shared laundry room that always smelled like dryer sheets. But it was home. My name was on the lease. My furniture filled the rooms. My life existed here in ways it never had anywhere else. I hauled my overnight bag up the stairs and unlocked the door. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Case files spread across the dining table. Coffee mug with a ring of dried liquid at the bottom sitting on the counter. Mail piled by the door, mostly junk and bills. The air was stale from being closed up for a week, but underneath that was the familiar scent of old books and the lavender candles I burned when I needed to think. I dropped my bag, opened the windows to let in fresh air, and stood in the middle of my living room just breathing. This was mine. All of it. Nobody could take it from me or diminish it or tell me it wasn't enough. My work phone, the one I'd left behind, had 16 voicemails. I listened to them on speaker while I unpacked. Most were routine. A potential client asking about rates. The bail bondsman following up on the skip trace. My landlord reminding me that rent was due on the 1st. And then, toward the end, a voice I didn't expect. Ms. Harper, this is Lieutenant Commander Ryan Caldwell. I got your number from your uncle. I hope that's okay. I wanted to check in, see if you made it back safely. I also wanted to apologize for everything that happened. You didn't deserve any of it. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. Not about Brooke, not about the wedding. Just talk. My number is, he rattled off 10 digits, then paused. Anyway. Hope you're doing all right. I saved the message but didn't call back. Not yet. I needed time to settle back into my life, to remember who I was when I wasn't surrounded by family drama and old wounds. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work. The skip trace turned out to be easier than expected. The guy had been posting on social media from a friend's house in Tijuana, geotagging his location like an amateur. I passed the information to the bondsman and collected my fee. The background check took longer. The woman's fiancé had indeed been lying, not about anything criminal, but about his education and employment history. Small lies that added up to a pattern of deception. I compiled everything into a report, handed it over, and watched her cry in my office for 20 minutes before pulling herself together and walking out with her head high. The surveillance job was tedious but straightforward. Sitting in my car for hours, taking photographs, documenting movements. The insurance fraud was real. The guy claiming a back injury was lifting weights at a gym 3 times a week. I got it all on video, turned it over to the attorney, and invoiced for my hours. Normal work. Good work. The kind of thing that reminded me why I'd gotten into this business in the first place. Chief Dawson came by on Tuesday, same as always. He looked thinner than he had 2 weeks ago, his cheeks hollow, but his eyes were still sharp. He settled into the chair across from my desk with a grunt and said, "You look different." Different how? Lighter. Like you put down something heavy. He studied me for a long moment. "You want to talk about it?" So I told him. Everything. The wedding, the speeches, Ryan's intervention, the drive home. He listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded in his lap. When I finished, he was quiet for a while, just nodding slowly. "That seal," he finally said. "Caldwell. He did the right thing. He blew up his own wedding. He told the truth. Sometimes those things go hand in hand." Dawson leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "I've seen a lot of marriages in my time, Val. The ones that start with lies don't get better. They just get more complicated." He saved himself years of misery. Maybe. Or maybe he threw away something that could have been fixed. Dawson shook his head. "You can't fix mean. You can manage it, you can work around it, but you can't fix it. Your sister sounds mean. Not hurting, not confused. Mean." He tapped his chest. "That comes from in here. And it doesn't change without the person wanting to change." I thought about that for a while. About all the years I'd watched Brooke cut people down, myself included, and convince herself it was justified. About how she'd turned herself into the victim every single time. "You think I should call him back?" I asked. "The seal? Why not? Worst case, he wants to apologize again. Best case, you make a friend." Dawson smiled, tired but genuine. "You could use more friends, Val. You spend too much time alone." "I like being alone. There's a difference between liking it and hiding in it. You've been hiding for a long time. Maybe it's time to stop." After he left, I sat at my desk and stared at Ryan's number written on a yellow sticky note. The smart thing would be to throw it away. To let that whole chapter close and move on. But Chief Dawson's words rattled around in my head. "You've been hiding for a long time." I picked up the phone and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the second ring. "Caldwell. It's Valerie Harper." A pause, then his voice warmed slightly. "Valerie. Thanks for calling back. I wasn't sure you would." I wasn't sure I would either. I leaned back in my chair, twisting the phone cord around my finger. "How are you?" "Honestly? I've had better weeks." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I'm staying with a buddy from my team. Sleeping on his couch, trying to figure out what comes next." "What happened after I left?" "Nothing good. Brooke made a scene." Her father tried to calm her down. My CO was there, saw the whole thing. That was fun to explain. He sighed. We haven't spoken since that night. Her lawyer contacted mine yesterday. Annulment proceedings. Turns out we were married for about 4 hours before everything fell apart. I'm sorry. Don't be. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I should be thanking you. You already did. At the wedding. In front of 200 people. Yeah, well. I'm not great with subtlety. It's a SEAL thing. We're more direct action than diplomacy. He was quiet for a moment. Listen, I know this is going to sound strange, but I was serious when I said I wanted to talk. Not about Brooke. About you. Your work. I've been thinking about what happens next for me, and I don't know if I want to stay in the Navy. I've got 2 years left on my contract, and then I'm out. I've been looking into private security, investigation work. I thought maybe you could give me some insight. I sat up straighter. You want career advice? Among other things. I also just want to talk to someone who doesn't look at me like I'm a train wreck. Everyone here knows what happened. It's all anyone wants to discuss. You're probably the only person who understands what that night was really about. There was something raw in his voice, something vulnerable that he was trying to hide behind professional curiosity. I recognized it because I'd heard it in my own voice plenty of times. I'm not a therapist, I said carefully. I know. I'm not asking you to be. I'm just asking if we can talk. Maybe grab coffee sometime. I'll be in San Diego next month for some training. If you're free. I should have said no. Getting involved with Ryan, even as a friend, meant staying connected to that night, to Brooke, to everything I was trying to leave behind. But something in his voice, that careful hope, reminded me of myself. Of all the times someone had thrown me a rope when I was drowning. Okay, I heard myself say. Coffee. Next month. Call me when you're in town. I will. Thank you, Valerie. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, wondering what I'd just agreed to. But underneath the uncertainty was something else. Something that felt like possibility. The rest of June passed in a blur of work and routine. I took on new cases, closed old ones. I repainted my bathroom. I started running again in the mornings, something I hadn't done since my 20s. The weight I'd been carrying, the weight of being the family disappointment, started to lift in increments so small I barely noticed until one morning I woke up and realized I felt almost light. Uncle Thomas called once a week, giving me updates I didn't ask for but appreciated anyway. Brooke had moved back in with Dad temporarily. She'd taken a leave of absence from work. She'd deleted all her social media accounts after the comment sections turned ugly. Dad was drinking more, Linda was trying to keep the peace, and nobody mentioned my name. Good, I said each time he told me. Let them figure it out. You're not even curious? Uncle Thomas asked during one call. Not really. Whatever happens next is their problem, not mine. Damn, kid. You really did put it down, didn't you? I'm trying. Well, keep trying. It looks good on you. In early July, Ryan called. He was in San Diego for 2 weeks, training at Coronado. We met at a coffee shop in Ocean Beach, a place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. He showed up in civilian clothes, jeans and a faded t-shirt, looking more relaxed than he had at the wedding. We talked for 3 hours. About his time in the Navy, about my cases, about everything and nothing. He was easy to talk to, direct but not pushy, thoughtful in a way that suggested he actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. When I mentioned Chief Dawson's cancer, he asked questions that showed he understood what it meant to watch someone you cared about fade. We didn't talk about Brooke. Not once. It was like an unspoken agreement between us. That chapter was closed. Before we parted, Ryan said, "I'm glad you called me back." Me too, I admitted. Can we do this again? When I'm back in town? I thought about it, about the risk of letting someone new into my carefully constructed life. Then I thought about Chief Dawson's words. You've been hiding for a long time. Maybe it's time to stop. Yeah, I said. We can do this again. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, and something in my chest loosened just a little bit more. As I drove home that evening, the sun setting over the Pacific in streaks of orange and purple, I thought about how strange life was. How a wedding that should have been the worst night of my life had somehow become the beginning of something better. Not because of what happened, but because of what I'd finally let go of. I wasn't the family disappointment. I wasn't the one who'd failed. I was just Valerie Harper, private investigator, person who showed up, woman who'd built a life on her own terms. And that was more than enough. 6 months later, I got a call from Dad. I almost didn't answer. The number flashed on my screen during lunch, and I stared at it for 3 rings before finally picking up. Valerie. His voice sounded older, scraped raw. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I need to see you. Why? Because I need to say something I should have said a long time ago. In person. Not over the phone. I could have said no. Could have told him the time for apologies had passed. But curiosity won out. When? This weekend. I'll fly out there. I'll come to you. 3 days later, Dad sat across from me at a diner in Point Loma, the same kind of place Mom used to work. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders curved inward, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he hadn't touched. The silence stretched between us until finally he cleared his throat. Your mother would be ashamed of me, he said quietly. For how I treated you. For letting Brooke treat you worse. For all the years I looked past what mattered. His eyes, when they met mine, were red-rimmed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to hear me say I was wrong. About everything. I waited. Let the words settle. Brooke's struggling, he continued. The annulment went through. She lost her job. Moved back home. She's angry all the time, blames everyone but herself. I see it now, what she is. What I helped make her. He rubbed his face with both hands. I gave her everything and never made her earn any of it. I ignored you because you never asked for anything. I took your strength for granted and called it independence. You did, I agreed. I can't fix it. Can't undo 30 years of getting it wrong. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. What you've built. Who you are. His voice cracked. Your mother would be so damn proud. I thought about staying angry. About making him hurt the way he'd let me hurt for so long. But sitting there, looking at this broken man who'd finally found enough courage to tell the truth, I realized I didn't want to carry it anymore. I'm not ready to have you in my life, I said carefully. Not the way families are supposed to be. But maybe someday we can talk. Really talk. Without all the history crushing us. He nodded, tears spilling over. That's more than I deserve. After he left, I sat in that diner booth for another hour, drinking coffee and watching the sun move across the water. The anger I'd carried for so long had transformed into something softer. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just release. Ryan and I kept meeting for coffee. Then coffee became dinner. Dinner became long walks on the beach where we talked about everything except the night that had brought us together. He left the Navy that spring, honorable discharge after 12 years of service. He moved to San Diego, got his PI license, and I hired him as my first employee. Chief Dawson died in October, surrounded by veterans who'd become his family. I spoke at his funeral, told stories about the man who'd seen something in me when I couldn't see it myself. Ryan stood beside me, and afterward, we drove to the coast and watched the waves until dark. Brooke reached out once, through Uncle Thomas. Asked if we could talk. I wasn't ready. Maybe someday I would be. Maybe not. Either way, it was my choice now. On a cool evening in December, Ryan and I closed a case that had taken 4 months to crack. A missing teenager, feared dead, found alive in Seattle. The family's tears of relief, their crushing hugs, reminded me why this work mattered. Why I'd fought so hard to build something that was mine. Walking back to the office, Ryan said, "You ever think about that wedding? About how insane that night was?" "Sometimes. But mostly I think about what came after." "What came after?" "This. My life. The real one." I looked up at the sky, stars just beginning to appear. I spent years thinking I'd failed because I didn't follow the path everyone expected. College, career, husband, house. The whole package. But I built something better. Something honest. Ryan smiled. "For what it's worth, I think that seal who crashed his own wedding made out pretty well too." "Oh yeah?" "Yeah. He met someone who showed him what real strength looks like. Someone who didn't need rescuing but let him stand beside her anyway. He stopped walking, turned to face me. Someone worth fighting for." I felt my breath catch. "Ryan, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. You changed my life that night. Not because of what happened with Brooke. Because you showed me what it means to stand in your truth even when everyone's trying to tear you down." I reached for his hand, laced my fingers through his. "You did the same for me. You saw me when I'd stopped seeing myself." We stood there on that dark street, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's perfect day. And I realized that sometimes the worst moments become doorways to the best ones. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you actually need. I wasn't the family disappointment. I never had been. I was the one who survived, who built, who showed up even when showing up was hard. And that was something nobody could ever take away. Mom would have been proud. I was finally proud too. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.